Perfect.
All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the podcast. Today we have Trevor Ragan on the podcast. Trevor is the founder of Learner Lab, formerly known as Train Ugly, one of the world's best resources when it comes to discovering how to learn more effectively and efficiently. Trevor has spoken at numerous events such as TEDx and has done talks with organizations such as UCLA, Microsoft, and Quest Nutrition, just to name a few. As most listeners know, I'm passionate about building a strong curriculum for my athletes, and it is important to get the most out of that. But Trevor takes it to the next level, and athletes have to be willing to leave their comfort zone and to be willing to get these results. So that is always fascinating me. So we're going to jump right into it. Trevor, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm excited for this one.
So before we get into all the good stuff, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how you got into sports, and then how you got into starting Train Ugly and Learner Lab.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Wyoming. Both my parents were basketball coaches. So like I went to my first basketball game when I was 5 days old. I grew up in a gym. I grew up on the buses. Like my idols, of course, were like Michael Jordan and everyone growing up, but even more so, it was like my parents' players at the high school level. It's like they were my heroes. And so like I was living and breathing basketball from day one. Early on, my dream in life was to play at Duke. I think I like watched the movie Rudy and was like, oh, I'm going to do that, but at Duke. Like screw Notre Dame football. I'm going to go to Duke. And I worked really, really hard. Like I love basketball so much and practiced all the time. And I got really good, especially for being like a 5'9" dude from Wyoming. Long story short, tried to walk on at Duke. I was out of the 100 people that tried out for the 2 walk-on spots, I was the last person cut. And that was really hard. That was like a big failure and it kind of put me into a tailspin. But I got to be a part of the program and be a practice player, got to be a manager, which was awesome. And I tell people like that big failure is why I do what I do now. So that big failure planted a seed in my head. And the seed was a question of like, what could I have done better? It's like, I spent so much time in the gym. I thought I did everything right and I still didn't make it. Like, what could I have done differently? And that question has always been running in my head, that curiosity of like, man, like what could I have done different? And I think that question is what led me to start Train Ugly, which at the start was similar to what you're doing. It was like, look, I want to figure out the best way to train basketball players. Like not just what I think is best. Like I'm going to just talk to people that are in the sports world, but also out of the sports world and try to come up with like a framework that could help us build better drills and build better practices. I started writing like little blog posts and making videos about this stuff. And I would do like basketball camps in the summer and that kind of blew up. It took off, but so many people started to read and share the blogs outside of the basketball world. And I realized like, wow, a lot of this stuff I'm learning isn't just about basketball. It's about learning in general. And that's when I kind of made the big leap forward. It's like, yes, I could have kept going with the basketball stuff, but like it's bigger than sports. It's like the fundamentals of learning, the principles of learning, they can help anyone. And that's why I kind of shifted from just the basketball stuff to learning as a whole, which is what I focus on now. So now it's just like anything that's science backed that can help us become better learners, I'm in. I'm going to try to figure it out. I'm going to try to talk to the people that did the research, and then I'm going to share it with anybody that will listen. So that's my job now.
That's awesome. And it's so similar to what I do in so many ways. And off air, I was talking to you. I think John Kessel mentioned something that really resonated with me, that for me, at least, we're always trying to be that person that we always needed when we were younger, which is why I started this journey with Strive and why you're doing Learner Lab. And so that's amazing. So I mentioned to you off air, I had all these questions for you when it came to motor learning, which is definitely something that you do, but you're so much more than that. So I'm just going to go ahead and ask you some motor learning questions because a lot of our listeners are fascinated by, say, blocked and random training. For me, I primarily train youth athletes here in Hong Kong, and technique is obviously a huge component when it comes to any sport. you and I play basketball, so something like a shot the technique is extremely important.
Yep.
But is there a way to train that technique without being so boring, doing rep after rep with muscle to build that muscle memory? Or does it really take just pure repetition?
I think so. The way I think about it now is what we're really trying to avoid when we practice, and this regardless of our age or expertise, is like when I'm in practice, I do not want my brain to slip into autopilot at all. When my brain slips into autopilot, I'm not really going to retain the stuff that I'm doing. It's like I might be good at it and I like might be in a groove, but my brain switches off. None of that is really going to stick. So then the question is like, well, what are things you could do to keep your brain out of autopilot? And that's where like the random block comes in. That's one way of doing it. One way to do it is to just not do the same thing a bunch of times in a row. So this even works in the classroom. If you're studying with flashcards, everyone's been there where you start to memorize the order. It's like, yo, I know what's coming next. I got this. And it's like fake progress. It's like, oh, I got these, no problem. It'd be much better if you shuffled the cards every time. Now you don't know what's coming next, and your brain has to focus a little bit more. It's not like ridiculously difficult. It's not much more difficult, but that little shuffle just keeps my brain a bit more engaged, and I'm going to get more from it. And the same rules apply to basketball. It's like, look, if I'm shooting 50 free throws in a row, 47, like number 3 to 50, I'm going to be in autopilot. Like I'm in a groove. Like I'm going to make a lot of those, but it's sort of like fake progress. It's like not really mimicking like the difficulty level of the game. And so I think step one, if we're thinking about like training athletes, is how do we keep people out of autopilot? One way to do that is to interleave the reps to create a little bit more randomness. The other and maybe even bigger thing that I would stress to the listeners, and this took me years to like kind of understand, and I got taught this by Dr. Richard Schmidt, who like wrote one of the textbooks on motor learning. I went and visited him in California before he passed away, and like sat in his office and talked to him for like a day. And the piece that he taught me that seemed to resonate and make the most sense is like, when you execute a skill in a open skilled sport like basketball or baseball or football or soccer, volleyball, when you execute that, there's sort of 3 stages of executing a skill. You read the situation, you plan what to do, and then you do. So read, plan, do. So if I'm shooting a 3-pointer in a game, my eyes and brain make a big read. I'm reading where the defense is, how much like time I have. But the big read that I'm making is how far away am I from the hoop? Now, of course, my brain doesn't like give me an output of a number like, oh, I'm 23 feet away or whatever. No, but it does make that read. The plan also kind of happens, which is how hard do I shoot this? Like how much force do I exert depending on where I'm at? And then the do is the technique. Read, plan, do. Every time I shoot a 3-pointer in a game, every time I hit a putt in golf, anytime I set a volleyball, every single one of those stages, read, plan, do, matters. And I can prove that to you. So, okay, let's say we have perfect technique, perfect do. If I make the wrong read, I'm missing the shot. Like I could have the best looking shot of all time, but if I'm not reading the depth or where I'm at on the court, I'm not going to make the shot. So I need to be good at reading, good at planning, and then good at doing. All 3 matter. If one's gone, the cycle falls apart. So the question is, we go back to block and random practice. If I'm shooting 100 shots from one spot, that's a lot of do's and not very many reads. So that's what happens. Like when my brain slips into the autopilot, if I'm shooting 100 shots from one spot, I have 1 new read, 1 new plan, and 99 do's, 100 do's. If I moved just a couple feet left or right between each shot, my brain has to make a new read. It immediately takes my brain out of autopilot, even if it's just a couple feet forward, a couple feet back. And then of course you could add more variation of like adding a dribble or a pass. But it's like the fascinating part for me is small adjustments to the current drills we already do
Yeah.
could make them way better.
Right.
And I was guilty of this. Like we had my high school purchased the gun, like the
Yeah.
shooting machine, and we had the one that would count your makes and misses. And I was pretty good shooter. I started on the varsity team as a freshman, and I like broke the school record in threes. I shot like 40% from three, and I shot a lot of threes. That was like my specialty. So 40% from three freshman year, my school purchases the gun. I live on that thing. When I first started, I would shoot like 100 shots from one spot. I could make like 50 to 60 every once in a while, and then I'd move to the next spot. By the time I was a senior in high school, I could hit 80 to 90 every time.
Wow.
From one spot, like all day.
The same
And
spot.
same spot. Like I wouldn't move. I'd shoot 100 from wherever, and I'd hit 80 to 90. I think my record was like 94. And my 3-point percentage my senior year in high school was 40%. So like that's why we need to understand motor learning in a nutshell. Is I got really, really, really good practice results, and none of them showed up in the game. None of them. So why did that happen? That happened because all my reps were skewed to just doing. And I wasn't getting good or better at reading. Now, I was a good shooter, but it wasn't because of the time I spent shooting 100 shots from one spot. It was despite shooting 100 shots from the same spot all the time. It's because I was like playing a lot as well. And those were the reps that were helping me grow.
Right.
So now you look back, it's like, okay, keep my brain out of autopilot and get more reps reading. What could I have done? Simple. Take a dribble, like shoot from the one spot, then take a dribble to the right, then catch, take a dribble to the left, then catch, shoot a three. If I'm just doing something different every time, it's way better. And then that answers kind of like your question. That's how you sort of refine the technique without going like totally crazy. I'm still getting a ton of shots up. And if I'm just moving a little, I'm making my brain get that fresh read every time.
That's awesome. So I'm just thinking back to when I was a kid. And obviously, like you just mentioned, technique is important. But after initial learning, so I practiced a lot by myself. I can kind of tell that you probably did a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, exactly. So if there was someone practicing by themselves, this is a pretty good avenue to go down, right? Because there's no defense or whatever. Okay, so then we're going to randomize it. Maybe with the gun, you have 3 shots from the wing, 3 shots to the corner, 3 shots, so we can randomize it somehow. But when I'm listening, if the way I'm hearing it is having someone there, having 2 or 3 or 4 other people there is actually more beneficial, even if you're not getting up as many reps. What would you say to that?
I would say that's accurate.
Yeah.
So like what you'd want to do is like you could set up a scenario where you play 3-on-3 for a while, which is like one of my favorite games to play. There's ways to manipulate the rules to get some stuff done. Then you go on the gun and have 2 or 3 people shooting on the gun at the same time. One is catching and passing to someone else. Like you can just vary the reps so it's not just ultra repetitive. So now I'm getting a lot of shots up, but we're also playing 3-on-3 and I'm getting those game reps. It's like, look, none of this is rocket science at all. It's like improving practice in a way, like big picture. And I saw this on one of your videos. You nailed it. It's like, we need to make it a bit more game-like. This doesn't mean you just roll the balls out and play, but it does mean it's like, what are variables that happen to me in the game? How do I introduce some of those into practice? Like that's a good first step for people. Just thinking about that. What are variables I see in the game? How do I incorporate them into practice? It's never going to be perfect, but if I'm incorporating a few more, it's going to be better. Maybe the next layer would be, how do I keep my brain out of autopilot? Maybe the next layer is, how do I get more reads during a drill? Like, okay, here's the drill that we do. What are things that could help me get more reads when I do that drill? Like my grandma could think about that and improve most drills.
Right,
Like none of this is that complicated. once you understand, like, what are we actually going for here? We're not just going for hard. We're going for is out of autopilot game, like lots of reading.
And I think a 16, 17-year-old me or you would say, well, I'm not getting up the amount of shots that I could be getting if I was just by myself. But for this, what I'm hearing you say is more quality over quantity.
Yeah, and it's like a mix. It's like we want both. It's like I would try to get 500 shots up on the gun like every day. And I would either do that before school or during lunch. It's like if I could have, and that would take like 45 minutes, maybe a half hour. It's like, okay, say I did that 3 times a week, but the other 4 days I was playing 3-on-3, it would be better if I was playing 3-on-3. Like I can take some of that time and put it over into this like small sided games or like something that's a little more game like, and that would be a beneficial. I'm not saying all or none, but I am saying it's like, okay, I'm on the gun. I can make that better by just shooting a different shot every time. And then I could also spend more time playing 3-on-3, which would help me a lot more as well.
So I probably overcomplicate it. I always tell people that I work with about the perception action coupling. I like your way better. It's read, plan, do. That's a lot more friendly.
Yeah.
What I've been fascinated with is if do is the last step of that process, and read is the first step of that process. And I've been doing a lot of work with reading Joan Vickers' book on vision and just learning about vision, because I think primarily when we play sports, the sensory motor system is usually going to come from the eyes, which is what I've concluded. Not that everything else doesn't matter, but the eyes is really where it lies. Have you done any kind of research, or do you have any information on how to train information to be processed quicker so that that process of read, plan, do goes quicker, if that makes sense, so that you can process information from your vision?
Sure. It's think of everything that we've talked about and everything that we're going to talk about tonight as a skill. So it's okay, reading is a skill, the do is the skill, and then read, plan, do is the skill, right? Like all of these are skills. And so like any skill, we want to do it, and we want to start to like create stretches when we're doing this skill. And so there are ways you can start to like manipulate rules during a drill to speed it up. There are ways to manipulate rules in scoring during a drill to like get people to do the thing in an environment where things are like moving and it's like a game. And when it's like 3-on-3, I think that is like sometimes in a way it's harder than 5-on-5 because you can't just go hide in the corner. You're like always involved. Like I do a lot of work with the US volleyball team. They spend a lot of time playing 3-on-3 in volleyball because every player is involved in every rally versus normal volleyball 6-on-6. You like touch it every third time over the net. So as we start to manipulate the games and the drills and shrink the teams, and sometimes we shrink the court, like we have some really cool drills where we play on the main hoop and the side hoop, and it's like shrunk down full court super fast. It's like those are ways we get better at decision making and reading, but we're doing it in the actual game. We're stretching them by manipulating the game, the drill, the rules to make them go faster.
Cool. One of the last things I have is for motor learning, before we dive into other subjects, is some of the coaches I've been talking to, and I've been talking to coaches from different continents even, is that the more experienced a player is, the more context they have, which is true, because when you're dealing with a kid, they don't really understand how to use a certain move at a certain time, or if you're talking to them, say, about a pick and roll, they don't even know what you're really talking about. So you really have to put context into all the do's, like you mentioned before. But when it comes to professional players, they have more context about the situation that you're trying to create, which in turn leads the coaches, some of the coaches that I've been talking to say, well, they don't really need random practice because they get the context. Well, look at because Kobe shot 800 shots a day with the same shot from the same spot, this might be right. What is your opinion on that?
Okay, so why did he shoot 800 shots? To get good at the technique.
Right.
So we're saying even Kobe had to still practice the technique. And what I'm saying is, if that's the case, we should also be practicing the reads. So
Right.
like, I don't think the argument holds up. It's like, well, you're saying if we get to a certain level, we don't have to practice a part of the skill, but you're practicing the other part. So
Yeah.
are you telling me like, why is he doing that? He's a professional. It's like, look, I don't care what level we're at. Okay, here's a good way to think about it. I've been doing a lot of work with the Major League Baseball team, and they're like really up with this and applying this and
Right.
like seeing some big time results. And sort of an aha moment we had with the hitting coaches is like, look, especially at the major league level, if you swing and miss, it's probably not because you swung the wrong way.
Yeah,
You
that's
just
true.
swung at the wrong time. Like you read the pitch wrong. You like didn't anticipate the location or the type of pitch. The read and plan were off. It wasn't the do. Like the swing was fine. It was just the wrong time and place. That's at the major league level. And I would say that that same logic applies at most levels. It's like once we kind of get the technique down, when we miss, it's not like, oh, all of a sudden like my hand was in the wrong like
Yeah.
spot on the ball. It's like, no, I just didn't read it right. Like I didn't plan. It wasn't the right read. It's like if a golfer misses a putt, it's usually not because they putted wrong. They aimed wrong, which meant the plan and the read were off. So it's like, look, yes, Kobe shot all those shots and like Steph Curry, like we see the videos of him, and those are great. And no one is saying we shouldn't do those things. But what we are saying is we will get a bit more if we're introducing a bit more variability. And especially for the people listening to this, like, look, we're not Steph Curry, we're not Kobe. It's like we should be spending a lot more time playing these small sided games. Doesn't mean we totally abandoned the time alone in the gym getting shots up. Nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying we could get a bit more. And I think that that works at every level. And so we've had these conversations with Olympic teams as well, and they're thinking the same things. Like the USA women's volleyball team, they've been in on this for a few years now, seeing big time benefits of just practicing better. Like let's out develop people. And that's what they're focused on. Even they are doing it.
And I hear that baseball is actually all over this kind of stuff, and it's very big. Where is basketball in relation to how? Where, I don't know. Like, how
I,
well received is it right now?
I think we're actually kind of behind the times, and
Oh,
I
okay.
think volleyball is probably the most advanced.
Okay.
Baseball is like on the come up. Uh, Basketball, I don't know. It's like if I look at the professional and college programs I work with and Olympic programs I work with, no basketball teams, man. It's football, it's baseball, it's volleyball, it's soccer, it's rugby. It's like everything except for basketball. And I don't really know why that is. I have some working theories, but I think there are little pockets in the
Yeah.
basketball world of people like starting to get it figured out. You've talked to some of the people on the pod. I saw you talk to Brian McCormick. Like he was like early to the party. I was
Right.
learning from him when I first got started. So there are pockets for sure, but it's not like widely adopted like the volleyball world. Like the volleyball world at the college and professional and Olympic level, they're having conversations like this, and everyone knows about the stuff that we're talking about right now.
It's amazing because I get a lot of drills from European soccer, like
Oh yeah, good.
a lot of drills. And they are, especially the youth coaches, like some of the ways that they set up like their small sided games is, and I can just
Mm-hmm.
immediately apply it to basketball. Like
Smart.
it's quite genius. Oh, okay. So that's, I think we've learned a lot about motor learning, but even more importantly, if we know that this is the way to go, but emotionally we cannot get our athletes to walk down that path, it's going to be a big problem for us. So one of the best analogies that I've ever heard you talk about is the jungle tiger versus the zoo tiger. Can you
Mm-hmm.
give us a little insight? What does that even mean? What
Sure.
is the comparison? Yeah.
So I like that because one, it'll put a bow on motor learning and then also explain learning as a whole. So jungle and zoo tiger is if you have two tigers and one is raised in a zoo and the other is raised in the jungle and they spend like their life in those environments, which of the two tigers is going to develop more? Well, you could ask that to a 5-year-old and they'd say the jungle tiger would. It's true. It's like, yeah, the jungle tiger is going to learn way more than the zoo tiger. The question is like, okay, well, like compare those environments. Zoo, predictable, easy. Every day is the same. I get food, water, shelter. I don't really struggle. I don't really deal with change. I don't really deal with problems. None of those things happen. The opposite is true in the jungle. It struggles all the time. Now, if we're talking motor learning, that is a good concept to drive our practice. The game is the jungle. The game is the jungle. No two games are alike. No two plays are alike. They're unpredictable. We don't know what's going to happen. They're random. There's pressure. There's uncertainty. Okay. The game is the jungle. The problem with a lot of people in the sports world is we practice in the zoo. So we're essentially training this little zoo tiger and then we release it into the wild and we're like, good luck. And that's why everyone listening, me included, we've all been there where we see a ton of progress during practice, but then it doesn't show up in the game. That's what happened to me with my shooting. It's like, yeah, I was practicing in the zoo. It was controlled, it was predictable, and I saw all of that progress, and none of it showed up in the game because I trained like a zoo tiger. What I needed to do was train like the jungle tiger. So if we're talking motor learning, it's if the game is the jungle, what I need to do is practice in the jungle. My practice needs to look more like the game. Use game variables to ratchet up the difficulty. We don't have to go off the rails, but that's like a good way to think about it. How do I practice in the jungle so I can thrive in the jungle, not practice in the zoo and probably die in the jungle? So then the question is, I love that you included this question, which is like, okay, that on paper makes sense. Again, you could tell that to a 5-year-old. They're on board with that message. How do we get better at spending more time in the jungle? How do we get better at dealing with the uncertainty? How do we get better at dealing with the discomfort? I think there might be 3 things I'd recommend. One, we have to sell people on the value of it. We have to explain like, hey, I'm not doing this just to be mean to you, or I'm not doing this just to make it hard. I'm doing this because this is better. This practice is better. So think about like working out. Everyone listening, we're taught when we're super young, like how to make a muscle stronger. We know you have to like lift weights, and what happens is when we're lifting weights and we get to like the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th rep, it's hard and it doesn't necessarily feel good, but I know that those reps are how I get stronger. So I do them. I do the 12th and 13th, 14th, 15th, because I know that struggle, those last ones, that's like really what helps me get stronger. So I know the value of struggle, so I'm more likely to do it. So same rules apply to learning. It's like if I know the value of the desirable difficulties, the struggle, I'm more likely to do it. So layer 1 is to explain this to the people, the value of getting into the jungle. Now, the other 2, I think, are more of the mental side of the game, which I spent a ton of time on. So one reason we might not do this is we don't believe we can. You're teaching me something new, a new move, new technique, whatever it may be. Cool, this is going to stretch me out of my comfort zone. I don't believe I can learn it. Well, I'm probably not going to go to the jungle if I don't believe I can learn the particular skill. So then the question is, how do you help people build the belief they could grow? Well, that's when you get into growth mindset research and understanding like whether we're talking about a big skill, learning as a whole, or a small skill or small technique, we have to build the belief that change is possible. Well, a good way to do that is spend a bit of time having conversations with them about what they call neuroplasticity, which is the science that shows like, yo, skills, they're not muscle memory. Skills are circuits in your brain. And to build a skill, you have to fire the circuit. Okay, that's interesting. But the best part of neuroplasticity is I interviewed a neuroscientist that's been studying brain since 1970. And on that call, he straight up said, our research shows crystal clear, absolutely everyone can get better at virtually anything if they practice enough in the right way. Doesn't mean they're going to master everything. Of course not. And we're going to land in different places. But if it's a skill, you can get better at it if you fire that pathway enough in the right way. So when you teach people about their brain's capacity to grow, how the learning process works, that they can build skills, that's really beneficial. So now we go back to the scenario of you're teaching me a new move, and maybe my first like reaction is like, oh, I can't do that. But then I remember it's like, oh, Will's teaching me a skill. I can learn skills because that's how my brain's wired like to work. Like my brain's designed to learn new skills. I can do this. Just because I can't do it now doesn't mean I can't figure it out. So with that growth mindset, I'm more likely to step into the jungle. And that brings me to the last one, which is it feels uncomfortable to get out of your comfort zone, because it's like called the comfort zone for a reason. If you get out, it no longer feels comfortable. So if you go into the jungle, it's no longer comfortable. So how do we help people get better at being willing to do that? Now, the old way that I used to do it, I would just tell people to like, don't worry about it. Don't be afraid. Like calm down. And I wish I could send them all an apology, because that's exactly the wrong approach. If you spend 20 minutes on Google just researching what are the best ways to deal with like fear and stress and anxiety, all these things we feel when we get out of the comfort zone, the worst possible approach is to try to suppress them and try to fight them. That the research across the board shows when we help people understand that it's human to feel those emotions, we become better at dealing with them. Not fighting them, not telling them to be fearless, but by saying, look, the way we practice here challenges you and stretches you. And whenever you're stretched and challenged, like it's going to feel a bit weird. That's normal and that's okay. Now, that might seem like a simple message to send, but that's one of the most powerful signals you could send to anyone you're working with. Because the problem is when you tell me to be fearless or tell me like, oh, don't worry or calm down, and then you put me into the jungle where I'm going to feel some discomfort, I'm going to interpret the discomfort as a failure. You told me to be fearless, but oh, I'm feeling fear. I must not belong here. I'm doing something wrong. I better go back to the zoo because I'm not supposed to feel discomfort. But if you took a minute and taught me that it's expected, that it's human, that it's okay, it's like, hey, anytime you get stretched, it creates discomfort. That's part of the equation. That's part of learning, and that's okay. Now I'm in that situation and I start to feel like that. And I remember, coach told me that was normal. It's okay to feel like this. Doesn't mean I'm doing something wrong. So think about dancing. It's like, okay, you want to get better at dancing. I could ask my grandmother, how do I get better at dancing? She'd say, you should probably dance more. Cool. But what we need to look at is like, well, why aren't I dancing? Is it because I don't believe I could get better at dancing? Boom. Then we need to talk about growth mindset. Is it because I don't want to look like an idiot and I don't like the way that makes me feel? Boom. We need to talk about discomfort and fear. And as we get that 1-2 punch of the belief we could grow, growth mindset, and the willingness to feel uncomfortable, even though it's not always fun, that 1-2 punch, those are the tools that help you jungle tiger more.
Oh, it's so good. Because I think a lot of the times when we're in the jungle, we're going to want to run right back to the zoo, right?
Because we're humans. Yeah.
Exactly. And so as a coach, I'm listening to you, I'm thinking the whole time, okay, I'm reframing what fear means. Fear is going to be there. It's not like we're trying to eradicate it and take it out, but it's expected. It means that you're out of your comfort zone. But when I'm listening to you, I'm thinking as a coach and as a mentor and as a guide that I need to reinforce it frequently.
Yes.
It's human. Like I'm going to want to run back to the zoo. Everyone is going to want to run back to the zoo when they're feeling fear. So
you do need to. Can I add one thing to it?
Yeah.
You do need to reinforce it frequently, but it is a powerful lesson that can live on. So they did a study at Harvard, and they had 2 groups of students there taking the GRE, a practice version of the GRE. One group is the control group. They take the exam, they turn it in. The second group reads one paragraph that says, you might be feeling a bit nervous, and that's normal. It's expected. It's human when you're taking an exam to feel nervous, and that's okay. One paragraph. Group 1 scores a 684 out of 800. Group 2 scores a 739 out of 800. So a pretty big boost in performance. 3 months later, the Harvard students take the real GRE. They report their scores back, and the same gap remained.
Wow.
This was one study, one day, one paragraph. And 3 months later, the students that read that paragraph did better than the students that didn't. And so it's like, yeah, we should reinforce this for sure. It's a good reminder, but just giving people permission to feel is powerful, because it's not like sometimes fear and nerves get a bad rap. Fear and nerves don't have a negative impact on performance and learning. Misinterpreting fear and nerves has a negative impact on learning. That's because, like, look, if you're competing and there's a scoreboard and you care, you're going to feel some stuff because you're a human. Our power is not in getting rid of the feeling. Our power is understanding that that feeling is okay, versus like, oh crap, I'm nervous, I must not be ready, or I don't belong, or I'm not prepared. And that snowball effect, that's what hurts performance, because it sucks up all our attention. It's like, oh, coach told me not to be nervous, but I am nervous. How do I get rid of this? Which, that's a battle we can't really win. Versus, coach told me it's okay, I'm nervous, of course I am. It's because I care, and it's because I'm out of the zoo and into the jungle, because I'm a human. It's like, whoa, that little adjustment, that can have a big impact on performance and learning. And this isn't just me like talking. This is like lots and lots and lots of research backs that up.
So I think you say reframing it, or I'll say putting a different perspective on it. Okay, I'm nervous, I'm scared, because this is actually amazing. It's something I've dealt with when I was much younger as well. How do you reframe it? Meaning, okay, I know it's there. Coach said it's okay that it's there, but how do I personally look at it from a different angle, if that makes sense?
I think so. The big one that we want is just the acceptance and understanding. It's like, look, there are certain things that make humans feel nervous, that create emotions, like triggers. Now, there's a lot, but let's say for basketball or even sports, four that matter for us: uncertainty, attention, change, struggle. It's like, yo, if those four things are around, you're going to feel some tough emotions every time. Uncertainty is, we might win, we might not. I might make this shot, I might miss. Attention is, I'm being judged. There's a score. There's people watching. Change is like obvious, and struggle is obvious. It's like, look, those four things create discomfort. Now you think about being an athlete, you've signed up to do something that maximizes those four things. Like most activities and most normal people who aren't athletes, the things they do don't involve as much uncertainty, attention, change, and struggle as like an athlete will experience. And so this is something I do a lot. Like before a big workshop, when I was younger, I was an absolute mess before these presentations. I was super nervous, but I interpreted the nerves as like, oh, I must be like too young to do this, or I'm not smart enough to do this, like the imposter syndrome. So I'm interpreting those nerves as a sign that I'm not prepared. Versus now, I still feel the same. Dude, I was nervous before this podcast. I get nervous before every talk, but now I know the nerves aren't because I don't belong. The nerves are because I'm doing something that involves uncertainty. The nerves are because I'm doing something that I care about, not because I'm not ready. So you see, the feeling is the same, but the interpretation is different.
Yeah. This is amazing. Like, it's hard not to get a little emotional, especially when it's something that you love. Like we share a love for basketball. And when I want to go back and help like a younger version of myself, or all the people who are like myself, and like being able to talk to you about this is amazing, because I wish this information was more readily available and people would consume it, because this is exactly what a lot of people need. It's amazing.
Dude, that's how you know you're on the right path. It's like, this happens to me a lot, where it's like, I wish I knew that when I was younger. Like, like if I just knew. That's good, because there's nothing you and I could do about that. But what we can do is help the people that are like coming up. Because if someone would have just told me that, the fear piece, just that, if I could have just heard that, it would have totally changed like the way I experience like sports and the way I approach practice. Period. It just would have.
Well, you've been very generous with your time. Just a couple more questions before we end. What are you currently looking at right now in your journey in terms of the cutting edge stuff? Like, what are you immersed in right now that you might see something that's a little bit newer, a little bit on the cutting edge for all this kind of stuff?
So like the funny thing with a lot of this is it's like sometimes it seems cutting edge and like out of the box, but
Yeah.
then if you just look back, it's like, oh, some dude was writing about that like 800 years ago. It's like, so a lot of this, it's like there's cycles to it.
Yeah.
What I'm really focused on now is I spend a lot of time from the individual perspective, like how does an individual get better at learning? And now I'm looking more at like groups. It's like how do the members of the group affect each other? So like in good and bad ways. And so like that's really fascinating. It's like not just like from the top down, but side to side. Like how do team members affect one another when it comes to learning and performance? So that's kind of the piece that I'm spending a lot of time on now.
Really cool, because I can imagine if you're talking about a team and I'm trying to learn as an individual, but I
Mm,
feel like I'm being judged by others, then
yeah.
my learning might not be what it could be. That's very
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
100%.
Cool. Okay. Last question is, so when you're looking back on your career, it's like years and years and years from now, what would Trevor Ragan say is a successful career for himself at this moment?
Mm, if I'm still just doing what I'm doing now, it's a win, man.
Yeah.
It's like I hit the lotto. This is the best. Having conversations like this, getting to work with the groups that I work with, and then like the secret best part about my job is getting to talk to the scientists, the
Yeah.
people that do the research, and like investing the time and money to meet them and talk to them and to share their research and give them the love that they deserve. Like that's awesome. And so if I'm doing that still, I'm calling it a win. And then there's these moments where like people reach out, and whether it's like the TED talk or a workshop, and they're like, yo, a year ago like I came to your workshop and it's totally changed the way I think about myself and I spend more time learning. It's like that's a home run. Like that's the best thing ever. That's all I care about. Like if people spend more time getting better at the stuff they care about, it's a win. And that every time we do conversations like that, it's more likely to happen. So I don't know. There's really no really end goal other than if I'm still on this road, like I feel like I'm like the luckiest dude for sure.
And I can guess the answer would be somewhat the same, but what would you consider a successful life is for yourself when you're looking back at everything?
I think it's like finding the balance of like I've gone like really hard with this, like building it up and learning and creating content. I think a successful life, big picture, is continuing to do that, but finding more of like the balance of like friendships and
Hmm.
relationships and like family. And like that's kind of definitely that would be my definition of success is finding that balance where I still get to get after it and grow and learn. Like I love doing that. And it's a bit more balanced versus like all my time and energy into this, which was like the last few years.
Right. Cool. Well, Trevor, you've been super generous with your time. Last thing is, where can people find out more about you and how can they get in
Yep.
contact with you?
Go to the learnerlab.com. My contact information is there. The videos are there. I try to write a new blog post like once a week. Those are there. I think a good one for the people listening that would kind of play off some of this conversation. It's called 3 Tools for Better Practice. It's right on the homepage. You can find it.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much. And looking forward to possibly having you on again in the future.
Anytime. I love what you're doing. And if I can help in any way, just let me know.
All right. Thanks, Trevor. Just stay on the line. Let me